Welcome to Gartner ThinkCast. I'm Karen Stokes-Lockhart. Managers remain the most effective channel for employee communication, but they're also the most overburdened, juggling return to office policies, pay concerns, and even company politics. In today's episode, we're discussing how leaders can equip their managers with the tools, skills, and confidence to communicate more effectively. To help us break it all down, we're joined by Alexandra Earl, Vice President in Advisory for Gartner's Marketing and Communications practice. Alexandra, welcome in.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So, to start off at a high level, as we usually do, could you give a quick overview on why we need to focus on good managerial communication?
Absolutely. So Gartner has just completed its latest internal communications channel benchmarking survey. And once again, we're saying that managers continue to be the most effective channel. So that's despite the fact that we've got an increase of a proliferation of digital channels in most organizations. But there's a lot of information overload. There's a lot of noise to try and cut through, and those digital channels don't always achieve that. And so managers continue to be the most effective channel for achieving 4 of the most important communication goals. So connecting employees to resources that they need to do their jobs, helping employees understand the link between the overall organizational strategy and their daily work. Also helping them understand the broader operating environment, and also helping them connect to each other, to connect to their colleagues. So there's a lot of benefits of having effective managers as communicators. And in addition to that, if you have strong managers, then your employees are 15 times more likely to be high performers. They're over 13 times more likely to be engaged. They're over 3 times more likely to have that high intent to stay. And they also have over 12% higher physical and mental well-being. So lots of benefits of engaging managers to reach and engage our employees.
Huge benefits, and it's especially important that you're able to quantify them too. So as important as this is, it seems also that pretty much every manager, though, is overburdened too, right? So what are some of the other challenges that they're facing?
Yeah, managers are hugely overburdened. I think organizations think, oh, we need to do this. I know we'll leverage our managers. And so they're on the hook for so many different responsibilities. And in addition to motivating and engaging and their employees, they're also having to deal with, like you say, office politics, return to office mandates, political issues that are happening within and outside of the organization, addressing pay concerns, and then also having to deal with the issue of quiet quitters. So there's a lot that sits on managers' plates, and yet we know that they can be the most effective channel to reach and engage our employees. So we really have to try and sift through that and make sure that we're using them in a strategic way, and not just for every piece of messages or communication that needs to go out. We need to be very mindful of their time and use them in the most optimal way.
Yeah. So you've talked about how important they are, also about how overburdened they are.
Yeah.
And I would love to jump into what we're calling the 4 C's of manager communication competencies. So if you can tell us what they are and then break down that first one for us, that would be great.
Of course. So the 4 C's of manager communication competencies, we've got championing, we've got coaching, conversing, and connecting.
Okay.
So that first one is around championing. So that's around motivating employees and their teams to want to work towards their goals, to help the organization move forward. But it's often around motivating them to keep going even through times of change. And most organizations are going through some degree, if not a huge degree, of change and transformation.
Right.
And so being able to lead employees through change and help them navigate that complex landscape, but understand, well, what does it mean for us and our roles? Break down the monster noun of and the concept of just change, but talking about, well, what does that mean for us? What do we need to kind of start, stop, or do differently as employees? So that championing is helping them kind of see the vision, the strategic direction, helping them take their employees on that path.
Yeah, change is huge. And like you said, there's so much going on right now. And then you mentioned the next C is coaching.
Mhm.
So can you talk a little bit about how feedback and guidance kind of play into really keeping the employees engaged?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, coaching is so important. We should never be having kind of those, annual, just once a year performance conversations where what you share with your employee is a surprise or a shock, worst case scenario. But it should be around having those ongoing conversations where managers are questioning what employees are doing to learn around what's working, what's not, where they need support, and then providing that ongoing feedback so that they can enhance and iterate and learn as they're going. So it's very much around being able to communicate those goals to them and communicate what they're doing and what they need to be focusing on, but also making sure that they are understanding where their employees are, and providing that feedback to help them improve along the way.
Absolutely makes sense. And so we've talked about championing, we've talked about coaching, and that next C is conversing. So tell us a little bit more about how managers can create really a true two-way dialogue instead of just pushing information out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, although we're looking for managers to cascade information, it shouldn't just be a one size fits all for their team and just let's send this information via an email. It's really looking at how do we have that dialogue? So, how do they
Mhm.
make sure that they, first of all, are actively listening to their employees to understand what's working, what's not, where do they need support, resources,
Right.
connections, where are there obstacles that they need to overcome? So, that active listening is really important. And then off the back of that, when they understand what those barriers are, then they can have that two-way dialogue and interacting with their employees to help them solve some of those barriers and problem solve on those in one-on-one conversations, but also in team meetings. And both of those channels have been shown within our survey to be most effective in terms of the channels that managers can use to reach and have that dialogue with employees. So both those one-on-one conversations and those team meetings are really important.
Yeah. I know as an employee, I definitely appreciate it when that happens.
Hi, I'm Mary Masalio, a Vice President Distinguished Analyst at Gartner. I've led several sessions at many Gartner conferences through the years, and if there's one thing I can say about them, it's that attending them is the best way to stay ahead of the competition. Each conference I've been to provides attendees with invaluable insights and ideas, and the content is always relevant and tailored to key issues being faced by leaders in every core business, be it finance, HR, sales, IT, supply chain, or marketing. Join me at a Gartner conference to learn about emerging trends and gain new perspectives that you won't be able to find anywhere else. Leave our conferences ready to contribute more at work, and most importantly, be equipped with the skills to turn new ideas into action. Visit Gartner.com/conferences or the link in the description of this podcast to learn more.
The last C to hit, connecting. What separates the managers who build trust and relationships from those who don't?
Yeah, I think that building relationships is really important. I mean, a lot of employees will stay at an organization because of that close connection that they've got to their manager and to their teams. We're definitely seeing that it's far less of a macro culture in organizations, but more of these micro cultures.
Mhm.
And rather than thinking of us being on like this huge tankard where we're all floating in the same direction on the same ship, doing things in the same way, we've all got our own micro cultures. We're like, it's more of a flotilla kind of approach. And so, within kind of like our small boat, we've got our manager and our team, we've got our own ways of doing things because we've built those relationships,
Mhm.
we've got that trust. And we understand what the manager is focused on and what their expectations are of us. And they understand what it means to us to come to work and what brings that connection. So that when managers help foster those micro cultures, because they've built those relationships, then they can provide the vision of the future for where those individuals and that team needs to go. And that really helps connect that team, but then also identifying where there are opportunities to connect, with other small boats in the flotilla so that you can understand who you need to connect with and what you need to be able to kind of progress in your career and develop at the organization.
Yeah. And so we hit championing, coaching, conversing, connecting, but I hear there might be a fifth C. Could you quickly touch on what that is and why it's a bonus inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So the fifth C is all around contextualization. And what
Mm-hmm.
we mean by this is when managers can share information and also the direction. And that translates into contextualization. And that's what's really important, because if information just comes in the form of a few bullet points at a very high level, if we take
Yeah.
a very minimalist approach by sharing information with managers and saying, hey, just share these 4 bullet points because you can just about remember that, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
taking up too much of your time. These are just the same 4 generic points that everybody's getting across the organization. It doesn't make any sense to us. I don't know what that means for me. What do I have to
Right.
start or do differently, right? So, by helping managers to contextualize their employees, they're basically translating, the strategy, or there's translating what the change or transformation is into something that's meaningful for that particular team. So they can see themselves in the strategy or in the change, and they know what they need to be specifically doing. So that level of contextualization is really important. And when we measured, all of the different things that managers could be doing to effectively communicate with their teams, contextualization, far outpaced all of the other activities they could be doing. So that's really key, that managers really focus on that contextualization, localization, and translation for their employees.
Makes sense. Kind of make it meaningful for me as an individual so I can really understand
Yeah.
and have that connection that you've been talking about. So it feels like we've gone through a lot already between kind of talking about how managers are overburdened, the framework itself, but we're still just scratching the surface. So what else would you say leaders should take away, or where can they go to learn more?
Yeah. So I think it's really important for leaders and managers to really reflect on their own current communication styles. So yes, you can look at how often am I communicating with my team?
Mhm.
What channels do I use? But really looking at that competency model and saying, if I look at those kind of 4 areas, on a scale of 1 to 5, to what effect, to what extent am I championing the organization? Am I helping my team navigate through change? To what extent do I provide the
Mhm.
vision? Am I building connections? Do I listen? Do I spend time to listen? Do I interact with my team, or is it kind of a one size fits all, push email? So I think it's really
Yeah.
important for them to kind of reflect on their own communication styles. And within the Gartner for Communications Leaders product, we have a lot of resources and tools that leaders and managers can use to self-assess their levels of dialogue and their communication styles, and to help prepare them to have more effective conversations with their teams. So that's the first thing, is turn the mirror around and be honest with yourself and say, to what extent am I effectively communicating, and what can I do differently?
Mhm.
The second thing that I think is really important is to lean on that peer network. And
Mm.
preparing for dialogue before you have that dialogue is actually a really good step in the process to put in place. So when a new change or strategy is announced at an organization, often leaders will be pulled into a town hall, and and managers might only get this information via an email, and immediately they're expected to have a conversation with their team and explain what's happening, where they've just had that information. They've not even processed it or digested it and thought about, what does this mean? And so a better process to have is to put in place what we call prep dialogue sessions. So you meet with your peers in a safe space, and comms doesn't need to facilitate this, nor does HR. This is around coming together in a safe space and saying, okay, what do we know about this information? What anxieties or concerns or questions do we have about this? Is there any additional information that we need?
Mhm.
But then what are the benefits of this change or this strategy? What is this going to mean for our part of the business? And then thirdly, what are the questions that our team are going to ask us? And do we know how we're going to answer them? Do we have anecdotes or examples of how we've been through something like this before, or information that's going to help contextualize this change or strategy for them, that help make it more meaningful for them and help them navigate what's going on? By having those conversations in a safe space, managers can much more
Mhm.
effectively prepare to have that dialogue. And they should come out of those sessions feeling much more credible and confident and capable to have conversations with their teams, knowing they're on the same page really as their peers. So that's a really good process to put in place. And then to keep the momentum, the third recommendation I'd make is to continue to tap into that peer network on an ongoing basis.
Mm.
When managers are going through change and transformation in difficult situations, whether it's, having to have really difficult conversations about reductions in force, or awkward conversations about return to office policies, or how shifts in legislation are impacting the organization. That can be really tricky. And as much as communications will provide support and resources, having conversations with your peers at the same level can be really helpful to kind of share those best practices with each other and lean on each other for support. And we're seeing many communications functions providing opportunities through social platforms within the organization to enable managers to connect with each other in that way. So really tapping into those peer networks and reach out to your communications team for help, because this is where they should be, supporting you. And if you're a manager, you should not be alone. You should be getting support through this so that you can effectively communicate with your teams.
Those are great. And if I quickly recap, I heard get really honest with yourself and do that self-assessment of the skills. Have those dialogue sessions where you can prepare and process and think through the information you need to communicate. And then make sure you're keeping on leveraging that peer network on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. All of those really good tips if you're a manager and thinking about how to effectively communicate right now.
Wonderful. Well, Alexandra, this has been so great. Thank you for sharing the framework and some of your insights with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and I hope it's helpful.
It definitely was. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of ThinkCast featuring Gartner Vice President Advisory, Alexandra Earl. If you'd like to learn more about our topic today, visit Gartner.com and follow the links in the notes. ThinkCast will be back wherever you listen to podcasts a week from today. In the meantime, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a colleague so neither of you will miss it.
ThinkCast is a production of Gartner. This podcast may not be reproduced or distributed in any form without Gartner's permission. It consists of the opinions of Gartner's research organization, which should not be construed as statements of fact. Content provided by other speakers is expressly the views of the speaker and/or their organization. While the information contained in this podcast has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, Gartner disclaims all warranties as to the accuracy, completeness, or adequacy of such information. Although Gartner research may address legal and financial issues, Gartner does not provide legal or investment advice, and its research should not be construed or used as such.